Welcome to Capitalize Your Finances, the podcast that's your ultimate guide to mastering personal finances and unlocking the secrets of entrepreneurship. Each week, we dive into the world of personal finance and business development and have fascinating conversations with industry experts, seasoned entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who share their insights, strategies, and stories to help you get ahead in life. Whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur looking to scale your business or someone just starting out on your financial path, this podcast is your go-to resource for inspiration and actionable insights.
Welcome back to Capitalize Your Finances. As always, I'm your host, Chris Ray Poniotu, certified financial planning professional, the Cap and Capitalize. And on today's episode, we are going to go over something slightly different, the 4 best ways to drive sales. Now, regardless if you run a business, you are a salesman or woman at your work, or even if you're not in sales, this is going to help you catapult your life. And indirectly, it does tie into capitalizing your finances because in order to manage your money, you first have to make money, and in some cases, a lot of money. So that's what we're going to get into today. But before we do that, as always, we're going to get into the free advice for the day. The best time to look for a CPA or tax preparer is from June through August or from the end of October through December. Now, the reason why this is so important, and I get this all the time, whether you're a client, whether you're a fan, whether you're a family member, let's say that January or February comes around and you're getting the notifications from TurboTax or the IRS, or well, hopefully not the IRS, but you're getting the notification from people saying, hey, it's time to do your taxes that are due on April 15th. People will go, can I get an introduction to a CPA? And I say, no. And the reason why is they're totally booked up. They have no time at all from really February 1 through April 15th to take on any new clients. And so if you don't have a CPA or tax preparer by that time, you're going to be pretty screwed. And if you can find someone that does have the time, that probably means they're not very good. Now, from June through August, because a lot of CPAs, it's not like they just free up after April 15th. It's kind of like going 100 miles an hour, and then when you take your foot off the gas pedal, you're not going 100, but you're still slowing down at like 60 and 50 into May. During the summer months, these CPAs, they like to live a little, and they like to have that break, and that's where they can really clear their minds and work on growing their business versus during tax season, they have to work on their business, which also brings up why people say, well, why wouldn't you recommend calling a CPA from September through October 15th? Well, that's because extensions are due. And in many cases, CPAs are actually busier then than they are during the normal tax season. But then once October is done, November and December are a lot lighter months. And so a lot of CPAs that I work with start calling me during November and December saying, hey, who do you know that would be a fantastic client for us to work with? So that is your free advice if you are looking for a CPA. And to you CPAs out there, you are welcome. Now, let's get into the 4 best ways to drive sales. And this is in no particular order, okay? The first one I want to go over is quickly find out what services support your business and become strategic partners with those people as fast as possible. So especially if you're starting a business and you're listening into this and you're trying to get your feet off the ground, obviously you love what you do, you know your product, and you know for the most part how to fill that need. A lot of people forget that there are other people that help you do your job. And I know that sounds really easy and kind of common sense, but if you're in it, you're not thinking about this stuff. So let's put a couple examples together. Actually, I'll just use my business. So I work with a number of CPAs. I work with a number of attorneys, insurance professionals, third-party administrators, things of that nature. And I was really fortunate early on to recognize that a lot of those possible partners would be wonderful referral sources. the best referral sources that you have are your clients. But if you're just starting out, you don't have any clients. And so you've got to quickly build trust with those strategic partners around you, because as you get those one-off clients here and there, just by scrapping and hustling and making a name for yourself, you're building your brand in the awareness of your effort is being noticed by these business partners. And so that's going to help you build up your business at a lightning speed as opposed to not doing so. Now, one thing that I want you to know is your business partners, your strategic business partners, it's not that they're going to change, but the order of, I don't want to say most and least important, but maybe least and most referable, okay? You're going to quickly figure that out over the first couple of years. And so what I've coached people on is, hey, you want to meet with every stinking business partner of yours that you've come in contact with. And, you got to like the person, but every 90 days. But what's going to happen after a year or two, and for sure 4 years and on, you're going to quickly figure out who is actually living up to what they were saying and referring you business. And on the flip side, who are you referring business to the most, and who do you guys have clients in common with that fit both of your personalities? Once you figure that out, you're going to start to carve off a lot of these business partners, and you're not, just kicking them to the curb. But let's face it, your time is going to become infinitely more valuable as the years goes on, because your business grows, your clientele grows. And then because of that, you don't have as much time to focus on your sixth and seventh best referral partner. You've got to go all in on your top one or two. So quickly decipher which ones after a couple of years are going to bear the most fruit. But again, it's going to take you at least 2 years to figure that out. Now, the second best way to drive sales: fill your calendar to the brim with as many meetings as possible. Now, many people get confused with the term experience, because when people think of experience, they think of the number of years worked. That is totally wrong. Experience is in the number of meetings one has. So the more reps you have, the better. And this also works with, there's a rule we've talked about in the past, and in my book coming out, Capitalize Your Sales, we're actually talking about this, called the Rule of Three. And this is by no means an original idea of mine. 6 months into my career, I remember reading an article by Michael Kitzes, who's well known within the planning industry. And he talked about this rule called the Rule of Three. And so in the first year of business, your only goal is to become known. And then your second year, your only goal is to become trusted. And that makes sense, because the first year, people are just figuring out who you are and what you're about. But then that second year, people go, okay, not only do I know who, in this case, Chris is, but I also know that he's stuck around, therefore I probably can afford to trust him more than when I was just meeting him for the first time, which I get it, right? That trust compounds. Now, after year 3, what starts to happen is you had your first clients in year 1 or customers. Those clients and customers start to refer you to their friends and colleagues in year 3, because not only are you known, in year 2 you're trusted, but in year 3 you're known, you're trusted, and obviously you've, in the eyes of consumers and customers and clients, you're going to make it at that point. Like there's that unwritten seal of approval. And then after year 3, 4 and on, you start to see the compounding just absolutely skyrocket. And for those of you that are only listening and you're not watching this show, I'm showing that your success is going up and to the right very, very fast at a very steep rate. Now, I want to caution you with something before we go to the commercial break, because, and I fell into this trap. I thought, oh, when I read this Rule of 3, and by year 4, I'm going to be killing it. I'm not going to have an ounce of a worry, because by definition, I've made it. Well, that was a lie. I mean, I can tell you for me, those first 2 years were absolute hell. Year 3 was difficult. Year 4 got a little bit easier. I would almost argue, for me personally, it wasn't until like year 5 or 6 where I really started to see things take off professionally, financially, and then that dovetailed into everything else. And I tell you that because if you are very literal like I am and you're listening to this or watching this and you go, oh, it's been 3 years and I'm not seeing it, that's okay. It's probably going to take you longer than the rule of 3, but always have the rule of 3 in the back of your mind and in some cases in the front of your mind if you get really frustrated. So it may happen sooner for a couple of you, but more likely than not, it's going to take a little bit longer. But it's a comforting rule, especially when you're just starting out, because don't expect to be immediately successful in the first couple of years. So with that, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and then when we come back, we're going to close it out with the last 2 best ways to drive sales. Stick around.
Capitalizers, this episode is sponsored by the best-selling book, Capitalize Your Finances, the how-to framework that takes you from compoundingly clueless to monetarily magnificent. Regardless of where you're at in your financial life, whether you're just beginning to express interest and commitment to your personal finances, at the pinnacle of your career, winding down into retirement, or thinking about your legacy for future generations, this book walks you through every step of the way so you can succeed on your terms and with your own values and passions guiding you. After reading this book, you will officially have Christopher A. Panayotou, the Cap in Capitalize, in your back pocket, guiding you in detail through every step of the way so that you can take charge of your finances, not the other way around. Head on over to Amazon.com today and start capitalizing your finances to the fullest with this incredible book, Capitalize Your Finances, the how-to financial framework that takes you from compoundingly clueless to monetarily magnificent. And now, back to the episode.
Welcome back to the show. I cannot wait to dive right back into the 4 best ways to drive sales. And with that, we're going to talk about number 3. When it comes to closing a client, focus on the pursuit of education, not hard sales tactics. So this one was a really tough pill for me to swallow. And it took me a lot longer to figure this out, which, before the commercial break, if you remember the rule of 3, that's probably why for me it was more like a rule of 5 or 6 or maybe even 7. I get it. If you are a business owner or a sales professional and you are watching or listening to this show and you have just started out, you are doing anything and everything you can to make $1. And that is not a sleazy thing. Now, you may be sleazy, but that in and of itself is not a sleazy thing. You're trying to make a living. There is nothing wrong with that. And you're doing everything you can to show that your intentions are pure and you're going to do right by whoever it is you are sitting across from, on a call with, whatever. And because of that, you kind of need the hard close in your mind incorrectly because you go, look, if I don't close this, I'm not getting paid. Okay. Whether you are starting a business, whether you are a sales professional, or even if you are supporting a sales professional and you're in service, you've got to understand that the first couple of years, you are going to be living really lean and you're probably going to feel some degree of broke, but that is temporary. And the reason why I say that is what's going to happen when you start to break through is you're going to start to realize very quickly, oh, financially, I can afford to have a little bit more time. So I don't necessarily need to close this person today, but because I'm not trying the hard sell, it's ironic because I'm actually closing more people. So there lies a nugget that's really intriguing. And it sums up in one word: empathy. Empathy leads to making the client or a customer feeling more comfortable with you. And let's face it, if financially all those things were true and you're not blowing money out of you-know-where and you are being prudent and you can risk not getting that next client or customer, And so you can be a lot more patient, a lot more kind. You can listen much more intently. That, by definition, leads to the client or customer thinking that you are extremely empathetic. You understand their needs. You feel their needs. And again, this is not a sleazy thing. This is actually one of the most genuine parts of salesmanship. And, you know, if someone is across from you and they feel the care that you have, which you do, you have that care. When they feel that care and they're more comfortable with you, that's obviously going to lead to trust. Now, we talked about this earlier with the rule of 3. The quicker someone trusts you, the quicker that will lead to a sale. And honestly, it's really that simple. Now, the reason why I bring up the education side of things and not the hard sales tactic is you should really care about educating whoever it is you are sitting across from. Because what that will tell that person that you are possibly selling to is, whoa, Mr. or Mrs. Salesman, he doesn't really care about the money side of it. He or she just really wants me to understand why this would be really valuable, almost regardless if he or she sells it to me or if it's someone else. Whoa, that education was really helpful. Maybe it was a lot, but I know that was stated out of the kindness of one's heart. I can't not work with that person. You see what I mean? So educate. And the more you educate, it's interesting, the softer the sell, but that means the larger the close rate, which is great. Okay. Now the last best way to drive sales. Once a client or customer has signed the dotted line, keep them coming back for more. And the best sale is consistent service. Remember that last part. The best sale is consistent service. So if your business is service-based, where you constantly have to talk with clients anyway, that's a much more straightforward situation. But regardless if you're a service-based business or not, you need some way, somehow, to get a reoccurring schedule on both you and your client or customer's books, and as soon as possible. Now, I'm going to use an example that most people wouldn't think of as far as something being recurring. So let's say that you're a car salesman, and you know, with car sales, let's face it, once you've sold the car, unless they, are going to come back in, 6 or 7 years, and you put that in your calendar of, hey, the average car owner keeps a car for 6 or 7 years. I'm going to mark that in my calendar. Boom. Hey, call me when you're ready. Most car sales professionals, like, that's it. And you can kind of get away with it because if you work at a dealership, people are already walking in. And if you work at, say, a Ford dealership, well, people are coming in to buy the Ford, and you just happen to be the tool that will get them to close that transaction. But what if you did this? What if you were a car salesman and said, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Client, and assuming you've closed them on that lovely new Ford Mustang convertible, soft top. You go, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Client, I really, really appreciate you entrusting me with this car sale. And we actually do things a little bit different. I know you're probably not going to get another car for the next couple of years. Am I right? And you actually kind of joke with that, because even though you joke with that, they might say, no, we're actually looking at buying another car in a couple months. Okay, put that in the notes. But if they say, yep, you're right. I'm like, okay, great. One of the things that we like to do is we like to actually keep in constant communication with our customers. Even though I know most car dealers and car salesmen say, hey, we have a number of customers. We don't actually like to say that. We actually like to say we have a number of clients. And the reason why we do that is we keep in touch and then pick your poison, 4 to 6 months. And so what I want to do is I actually want to pull up our calendars. Would it be okay in 4 months, because you just bought the car, we just have a 15-minute call and I check in to make sure that everything is perfectly dialed for your car that you purchased. And if you have any issues at that point, you let me know. We'll get you in and we'll get you right. Do you have any opposition of doing that? I don't know of anyone that would go, yeah, no, we're not doing that. They would probably be stunned, because in the car industry specifically, and this isn't becoming an episode of just like Car Sales 101, but in the car business specifically, it's just unheard of. I can tell you, we've bought a couple cars over like my wife and my life, and that's never happened, ever. And if that did happen, I would be blown away. And so, in the car industry is a really easy one to use, but take that and use anything. I mean, if you're a plumber, I mean, hopefully your toilet isn't breaking every 4 to 6 months, but why don't you do that? If you're in HVAC, if you're in painting, if you're in landscaping, like high end or low end, it doesn't matter. It does not matter. The second you understand that reoccurring service is the best way to close sales, that is going to lead to a lifetime of growing your sales, which of course will help you capitalize your finances. And then the one little bonus tip that I'm going to leave you before we close this thing out, when you're meeting with those people after the 4 to 6 months, at the very end, because up until that point, up until the very end of every interaction, the only thing that you care about is whoever you're talking to, whether it's their car, whether it's their lawn, their toilet, like whatever it is that you've serviced and taken care of. Once you get to the very end and you get them on the next call 4 to 6 months down the road, you leave them with this: Mr. and Mrs. Client, I have loved working with you, and I really appreciate the mutual relationship that we've built. Yes, I am, your, in this case, car salesman or whatever the case may be, but you've also taken the time to reciprocate that within our business, and I really, really appreciate it. I wanted to ask you, who do you know that would benefit from the relationship that we have built over the coming months? And then you just shut up and you listen. And they're either going to say, that's a great question. I've never really thought of that. That's what most of them are going to say. You go, okay. And you just jot it down. And then on the next call, you just casually remind them. Or they'll say, whoa, I actually have X, Y, and Z person. Tell me about him. Tell me everything about him. Writing it down. And then once they're done explaining all of that, hey, would it be okay if, we had an introduction, whether that's an email or a call, whatever the case is? Would it be actually okay if I reached out and said that you gave me their information? You want to be strategic with this, but you don't want to, because you don't want to come across as hard selling. And it's always genuine, but even though it's genuine, sometimes you can be playing hardball. And I've ran into that. So, take it from a guy who's literally preaching this stuff to you. And then there are times where the customer client will say that, that's really not their thing. Maybe they feel uncomfortable with introductions, or, they just kind of like to keep to themselves. That's fine too. That is totally fine too. But regardless, you always have to ask that question at the very end, because that plants a seed for future sales down the road. So that does it for today's episode on the 4 best ways to drive sales. There's a plethora more that we could have talked about, but these are the 4 best ways to drive sales that have helped me in my career. So hopefully I can help you as well. I cannot wait to chat with you next week. And as always, keep capitalizing. Take care. If you have questions about today's episode or any personal finance questions, please reach out to me at Cap and Capitalize on Instagram, Chris at capitalizeyourfinances.com, or via our website, capitalizepodcast.com. If you want more Capitalize Your Finances content, head on over to capitalizepodcast.com and check out our blog, free resources, book, and online course. As always, I'm your host, Christopher Paniotu, Certified Financial Planning Professional, the Cap and Capitalize. And until next time, keep capitalizing.
The information provided should not be considered specific tax, legal, or investment advice and is not specific to any individual's personal circumstances. Each taxpayer should seek independent advice from a tax professional based on his or her individual circumstances. Examples cited are hypothetical, are for illustrative purposes only, are not guaranteed, and subject to potential federal and state law amendments. There is no guarantee that you will achieve the results discussed or illustrated. Christopher A. Paniotu is a registered representative with and securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. The people and companies mentioned in this podcast are not affiliated with or endorsed by LPL Financial or Capitalize Your Finances.